The person you love talked about you. Find out what they said. Don't scroll, listen to this, because the moment your eyes landed here, something subtle shifted in your spirit, and your heart needs this right now. This message is for you, and it's coming through like a gentle knock you weren't expecting but somehow recognized instantly. Take a breath. Stay with me. The person you love didn't mention you casually. Your name didn't come up as small talk or background noise. It surfaced in a moment of honesty, in a space where defenses drop and truth rises, and listen to this, what they said carried weight. They were with people they trust, maybe late at night or in that quiet stretch of time when the world softens and feelings get louder, and something inside them said, say it now. Don't scroll, because this matters. They talked about how you changed the rhythm of their life without trying, how your presence, your energy, stayed with them even when you weren't around, how they found themselves noticing repeating numbers right after thinking of you, how certain songs suddenly felt written for moments you shared, how memories arrived without warning and refused to leave. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. They admitted they tried to keep it light at first, tried to laugh it off, tried to frame you as just another chapter, but the words didn't cooperate. The truth kept leaning forward. They said your name slower than they meant to, and when someone asked, what is it about them, they paused, really paused, and that silence told the story before the words did. Don't scroll. They said you made them feel seen in a way that rearranged them, that being around you felt like coming home to a version of themselves they'd been missing, and that scared them because it felt real. Listen to this. Your heart needs this right now. They confessed they've been asking the universe for clarity, for signs, for confirmation they weren't imagining it, and every time they asked, something answered, numbers lining up, dreams repeating, your initials appearing where they shouldn't, a nudge they couldn't explain. They told their friends they tried to ignore it, tried to distract themselves, tried to be logical, but the more they resisted, the louder it got. Don't scroll. Stay. Because here's the part that lands gently but deeply. They said you awakened something. Not chaos, awakening. Something honest. Something tender. Something that made them want to be better without being asked. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. They admitted they replay conversations with you, not because they're stuck in the past, but because those moments feel alive, like they're still teaching them something. They said your laughter echoes when they're quiet, that your kindness softened places they didn't realize were armored, that your boundaries made them respect you more, not less. Don't scroll. They told the room they felt a pull they couldn't name, and when someone joked about destiny, they didn't laugh, they nodded. And that nod carried a confession they hadn't practiced saying out loud. Listen to this. Your heart needs this right now. They spoke about timing. How it hasn't always been easy, how circumstances felt complicated, how fear tried to bargain with feeling, but they also said something shifted recently. A calm settled in. A knowing. Like the universe wasn't pushing anymore, just making space. Don't scroll. They admitted that when they see repeating sequences, 1111, 222, 555, it's not superstition to them anymore. It feels like a reminder to pay attention, like a whisper saying, this is aligned. Listen to this. Your heart needs this right now. They shared that you've been in their dreams, not dramatic dreams, but peaceful ones, walking, talking, existing, and that peace is what lingered when they woke up. Don't scroll. They said they're learning the difference between wanting and choosing, between fantasy and presence, and that you feel like presence. Like now. Like something grounded. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. They admitted they're tired of pretending they don't care, tired of minimizing what they feel to make it easier, tired of leaving words unsaid. And when someone asked what they planned to do, the room went quiet again. Not because they had no answer, but because the answer felt close. Don't scroll. They said they don't want to rush, but they don't want to hide either. They want honesty to lead, patience to protect, and courage to show up when the moment is right. Listen to this. Your heart needs this right now. They acknowledged that you might have felt a shift recently, an unexpected calm, a sudden heaviness lifting, a sense of anticipation without a clear reason, and they believe that's because energy moves before actions do. Don't scroll. They spoke about respecting your path, honoring your timing, and not interrupting your peace just to soothe their own longing. That restraint? That's growth. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. They said whatever happens next must be mutual, must be real, must be rooted in truth rather than fear. And the universe, quiet, patient, seems to be agreeing. Don't scroll. This conversation didn't end with a plan scribbled on paper or a promise made too soon. It ended with intention. With resolve. With a sense that something meaningful has already begun simply because truth was spoken. Listen to this. Your heart needs this right now. The words they shared didn't fade when the night ended. They lingered, rearranging possibilities, softening edges, opening doors that had been closed for protection, not disinterest. Don't scroll. The universe doesn't reveal everything at once, it reveals what you're ready to hold. And right now, what you're meant to hold is this knowing, you are thought of with care, spoken of with respect, and felt with depth. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. What they said wasn't an ending. It was a beginning quietly taking shape, guided by alignment, patience, and a love that's learning how to speak honestly when the moment arrives. Stay with this, because part 2 is where the energy deepens and the truth behind that conversation starts to unfold layer by layer, and your heart needs this right now even if you don't fully understand why you felt a sudden pause in your chest when you kept thinking about them after that night. Listen to this carefully, because after they talked about you, something shifted internally that they couldn't undo, not dramatically, not loudly, but in a quiet, irreversible way, like a door closing behind them and another one opening ahead, and they felt it immediately. Don't scroll, because this is where it gets real. After those words were spoken, they went home carrying a heaviness mixed with relief, the kind that comes when you finally admit something you've been holding in for far too long, and that admission didn't make them weaker, it made them clearer. They lay awake replaying what they shared, wondering why it felt so necessary to say your name out loud, and realizing it was because keeping it silent was starting to feel dishonest. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. They noticed how their body reacted afterward, how their breathing slowed, how their mind stopped racing, how a calm settled in that they hadn't felt in a long time, and that calm told them something important, that truth doesn't create chaos, it creates alignment. Don't scroll, Because alignment always feels steady before it feels exciting, they began noticing subtle confirmations around them, not as overwhelming signs, but gentle affirmations, like overhearing conversations about timing, seeing reminders about patience, catching moments where the world seemed to pause just long enough for them to think of you again. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. They realized that thinking of you no longer brought confusion, it brought clarity, and that distinction mattered. They also reflected on the moments you shared, not through nostalgia, but through understanding, recognizing how those interactions shaped them, softened them, challenged them to be more present and intentional. Don't scroll, because this is important. They recognized that you didn't ask for anything from them except honesty, and that realization stayed with them. They felt a sense of responsibility, not obligation, but respect for what exists between you. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. They started paying attention to their own patterns, noticing how they used to avoid emotional depth, how they once brushed off meaningful connections, and how different this feels now. They admitted to themselves that whatever this is, it deserves care, not avoidance. Don't scroll, because avoidance loses its power once awareness takes root. They also felt moments of vulnerability arise unexpectedly, small waves of emotion when they imagined seeing you again, hearing your voice, sharing space without pretending everything is casual. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Those moments didn't overwhelm them. They grounded them, reminding them that emotional presence is not a threat when it's met with maturity. They also became aware that their past fears were shaped by old experiences, not by you, and that realization allowed them to separate history from possibility. Don't scroll, because separating the past from the present is how healing happens. They noticed how their inner dialogue changed, how instead of asking, "Why am I feeling this?" they started asking, "How do I honor this?" And that shift signaled growth. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. They began feeling a quiet confidence building, not arrogance, not certainty about outcomes, but confidence in their ability to be honest, respectful, and present. They also sensed that you might be feeling something too, a subtle pull, a sense of anticipation, a calm curiosity. And that mutual awareness made the connection feel balanced rather than one-sided. Don't scroll, because balance is key. They stopped viewing the situation as something to figure out and started seeing it as something to experience authentically, one step at a time. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. They also realized that the conversation they had wasn't meant to create pressure, it was meant to clear space, to remove internal noise so they could hear their own truth more clearly. And now that truth feels steady. They're noticing that their reactions to the world around them have softened, that distractions don't hold the same appeal, that they're more intentional with their time and energy. Don't scroll, because intentionality changes everything. They've begun to understand that real connection doesn't demand urgency, it invites presence, and that understanding has made them more patient rather than more anxious. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. They're no longer rehearsing scenarios driven by fear of rejection or loss. They're imagining interactions guided by mutual respect and openness, and that difference has changed how they feel about reaching out when the time feels right. Don't scroll, because timing guided by calm is different from timing driven by fear. They've also started to appreciate the way you hold your own space, how you don't chase, don't force, don't demand explanations, and that self-respect has deepened their admiration. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Admiration rooted in respect lasts longer than attraction rooted in impulse. they're also aware that whatever comes next needs to be built slowly, honestly, and with clarity, and that awareness has removed the need to rush or hide. Don't scroll, because rushing and hiding are symptoms of fear, not love. They're feeling that this connection has reached a new phase, one defined less by internal conflict and more by intentional movement, even if that movement is subtle at first. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Subtle movement is still movement. They've also recognized that silence between you now feels different, not distant, but spacious, like a pause filled with potential rather than absence. Don't scroll, because space allows truth to breathe. They're trusting that whatever unfolds will do so naturally, without manipulation, without games, without emotional confusion, and that trust has brought them peace. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Peace is a sign of alignment, not indifference. They're becoming comfortable with the idea that love doesn't need to announce itself loudly to be real. It simply needs to show up when both people are ready to meet it honestly. Don't scroll, because honesty changes the course of everything. Part 2 is about integration, about the truth settling into action-ready clarity, about the moment after words are spoken when intention begins to take shape quietly, steadily, and with purpose, and that process is still unfolding, guided by respect, awareness, and a deep understanding that what's real doesn't need to be forced, it simply needs to be honored. Stay right here, because part 3 is where the meaning behind everything you've been sensing starts to make sense, and your heart needs this right now, even if you've been trying to stay grounded and not read too much into the quiet moments when they cross your mind out of nowhere. Listen to this carefully, because after the internal shift settled, something else began to happen that they didn't expect, a deeper awareness, not loud or dramatic, but steady and persistent, like a truth gently tapping on their shoulder, asking to be acknowledged. Don't scroll, because this part connects directly to why you may have felt emotionally stirred lately without a clear reason. They began to notice how your energy shows up in their daily life in subtle ways, not as distraction, but as clarity, moments when they pause mid-task and realize their thoughts feel calmer when they think of you. Moments when choices feel simpler because they imagine how honesty would guide them rather than fear. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. They started recognizing that the connection doesn't pull them away from themselves, it pulls them closer to who they want to be, and that realization changed how they view everything. They reflected on past relationships and patterns, noticing how those connections often demanded compromise of self, while this one invites authenticity. Don't scroll, because authenticity is rare and it changes people. They began to understand that what they feel isn't urgency, it's readiness, a grounded sense that when something is real, it doesn't rush, it waits until both hearts are aligned enough to meet honestly. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. They also became aware of how often your name arises internally during moments of decision, not as pressure, but as a compass, a reminder of the kind of energy they want to welcome into their life. They've noticed that when they imagine future scenarios, work, growth, healing, you're present in those images not as a fantasy, but as a calm, supportive presence. Don't scroll, because this matters deeply. They're no longer asking whether this connection is meaningful, they're asking how to honor it responsibly. That shift alone marks a turning point. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Responsibility doesn't mean burden, it means care. They've also become sensitive to how silence between you feels now, noticing that it doesn't create anxiety the way it once might have. Instead it feels intentional, like a pause that's doing important work behind the scenes. Don't scroll, because pauses often prepare the ground for clarity. they've started noticing emotional echoes when something reminds them of you, not overwhelming waves, but gentle reminders that what's unspoken still exists. They understand now that feelings don't disappear simply because they aren't constantly expressed. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now, there. Realizing that connection isn't measured by frequency of contact but by consistency of presence, and you've remained present in their inner world in a way that feels steady and reassuring. They've also noticed that conversations with others feel different now, less surface level, less distracting, because their emotional awareness has sharpened. Don't scroll, because emotional awareness changes how people listen. They've become more reflective, more thoughtful, more willing to sit with discomfort rather than escape it, and this growth didn't come from pressure, it came from connection. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. They've begun to see you not as someone they're trying to impress or pursue, but as someone they want to meet honestly, without masks, without games, without emotional shortcuts. They're recognizing that whatever happens next should feel mutual, respectful, and grounded in reality rather than fantasy. Don't scroll, because grounded love lasts. They've also started noticing a pattern in their environment, moments when conversations around them touch on themes of timing, truth, and courage, and while they don't label these moments dramatically, they do pay attention, because awareness has taught them that meaning often arrives quietly. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. They've become more patient with themselves, understanding that clarity unfolds in stages, and that rushing would only blur what's becoming clear. They're no longer tempted to test or provoke reactions, they're choosing steadiness instead. Don't scroll, because steadiness builds trust. They've also begun to respect your autonomy more deeply, recognizing that your journey matters as much as theirs, and that any future interaction should honor both paths equally. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Respect is a form of love that often goes unnoticed but changes everything. They're also aware that vulnerability doesn't require immediate expression, it requires readiness, and that readiness feels closer now than it ever has before. Don't scroll, because closeness isn't always visible. They've noticed that their emotional reactions have softened, that they're less defensive, less reactive, more open to understanding rather than control, and this openness has allowed them to imagine speaking honestly without fear of destabilizing everything. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Honesty feels safer when it's rooted in self-awareness. They're also beginning to accept that not every answer needs to be known in advance, that some truths reveal themselves only after the first step is taken, and that acceptance has removed much of the internal resistance they once felt. Don't scroll, because resistance fades when trust grows. They've become comfortable with uncertainty, not because they don't care, but because they trust their ability to respond with integrity when the moment comes. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Integrity guides actions more clearly than fear ever could. They're also sensing that you're not waiting passively, that you're living fully, grounded in your own rhythm, and that awareness has made them want to meet you as an equal rather than from a place of need. Don't scroll, because equality creates balance. They're no longer framing the situation as, will this work, but as, can I show up honestly? And that question has simplified everything. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Simplicity brings peace. They're starting to feel that the universe isn't testing them anymore, it's observing how they integrate what they've learned, and that observation feels calm, not pressured. Don't scroll, because calm guidance feels different from urgency. They've realized that whatever unfolds next will be shaped by intention rather than impulse, and that realization has given them confidence. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Confidence rooted in self-awareness is quiet but powerful. They're beginning to feel that the time for internal processing is nearing completion, not because everything is resolved, but because enough clarity exists to move forward without confusion. Don't scroll, because clarity doesn't require certainty, it requires honesty. Part 3 is about recognition. Recognition of growth, recognition of truth, recognition of the kind of connection that doesn't disrupt life but enhances it, and that recognition is guiding them gently, steadily, and with respect toward the next moment when words may finally align with feelings that have already found their place. Stay with this moment, because part 4 is where the unseen begins to feel tangible, and your heart needs this right now, even if you've been trying to stay practical and grounded while something softer, deeper, and more meaningful keeps rising to the surface. Listen to this carefully, because after recognition came preparation, not preparation in the sense of planning a perfect moment, but preparation of the heart, the kind that happens quietly when someone starts aligning their actions with their truth. Don't scroll, because this is the phase where intention begins to crystallize. They started noticing that their inner world feels more settled now, less conflicted, less divided, as if the parts of them that once argued with each other have finally agreed on something important, and that agreement feels like peace. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Peace doesn't mean inactivity, it means readiness. They've been reflecting on what it means to show up fully. Not with grand promises or dramatic gestures, but with consistency, presence, and honesty, and that reflection has reshaped how they view connection altogether. Don't scroll, because this shift matters. They've begun to imagine conversations with you not as rehearsed speeches, but as real exchanges where listening matters as much as speaking, where understanding is more important than impressing. And that mindset has softened their approach. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Softness is not weakness, it's maturity. They've also noticed how their intuition has sharpened, how they can sense when something feels aligned and when something feels forced, and thoughts of you consistently fall into the aligned category: calm, steady, and grounding. Don't scroll, because alignment has a feeling. They're becoming aware that their desire to connect isn't driven by loneliness or fear of loss, but by appreciation. A genuine recognition of who you are and how your presence enriches their life. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Appreciation creates stability. They've also been more mindful of timing, not as something to control, but as something to respect, understanding that rushing would only disrupt the natural flow that's been building between you. Don't scroll, because patience protects what matters. They've felt moments where the urge to reach out arises gently, without anxiety, without urgency, just a calm sense of soon, and that feeling lingers without demanding immediate action. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Calm impulses are different from impulsive reactions. They've also reflected on how you've handled distance, silence, and uncertainty with grace, and that grace has deepened their respect for you more than constant availability ever could. Don't scroll, because self-respect is magnetic. They're recognizing that your ability to stay centered, to live your life fully without chasing validation, signals emotional strength, and that strength makes the idea of connecting feel safe rather than risky. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Safety invites vulnerability. They've also started letting go of outdated narratives about how relationships should unfold, releasing pressure to meet expectations that don't resonate with who they are now. And that release has allowed them to approach this connection on its own terms. Don't scroll, because authenticity thrives when expectations loosen. They're becoming more honest with themselves about what they want to offer, not promises they can't guarantee, but presence they can sustain, respect they can show consistently, and communication rooted in clarity. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Sustainable love is built on what can be given repeatedly, not just intensely. They've also noticed that their emotional reactions to external stressors have changed, that they're less reactive, less defensive, more reflective, and that inner stability makes the idea of opening up feel manageable rather than overwhelming. Don't scroll, because stability changes everything. They're also sensing that this connection isn't meant to disrupt either of your lives, but to integrate naturally into them, adding depth without chaos, support without dependency. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Integration is a sign of maturity. They've reflected on how you communicate, how you express boundaries, how you show care without overextending, and those qualities have become benchmarks for what they want to mirror in themselves. Don't scroll, because healthy connection inspires growth. They're also becoming more comfortable with vulnerability in general, noticing that opening up in small, honest ways hasn't led to rejection but to understanding. And that realization has reduced their fear of being seen. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Being seen feels safer when you trust yourself. They've begun to accept that no connection comes with guarantees, but that doesn't make it any less worth honoring, and that acceptance has freed them from needing certainty before acting. Don't scroll, because certainty isn't required for sincerity. They're also aware that whatever unfolds next should respect your autonomy, your pace, and your boundaries. And that awareness has shaped their intention to approach gently, without pressure or expectation. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Gentleness builds trust. They've stopped viewing silence as a problem to solve and started seeing it as space that allows feelings to settle into clarity, and that reframing has removed much of the anxiety they once felt. Don't scroll, because space reveals truth. They're also recognizing that their feelings for you don't fluctuate with mood or circumstance. They remain consistent, and that consistency has reassured them that what they feel is grounded rather than fleeting. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Consistency is a sign of depth. They've begun to imagine not just how it would feel to speak honestly, but how it would feel afterward, to live with integrity, knowing they honored their truth regardless of outcome, and that imagined relief has motivated them more than any fantasy ever could. Don't scroll, because integrity brings peace. They're also noticing that their intuition feels less urgent and more encouraging now, like a quiet voice saying, "You're ready when you choose to be," and that encouragement feels supportive rather than demanding. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Encouragement empowers choice. They've become comfortable with the idea that love doesn't need to announce itself loudly to be real. It just needs to show up with care, respect, and honesty. And that understanding has shaped how they're preparing to move forward. Don't scroll, because preparation rooted in calm leads to meaningful action. Part 4 is about readiness without pressure, intention without force, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing that when something is real, it doesn't rush. It arrives when both hearts are steady enough to receive it. Stay right here with me, because Part 5 is where the emotional current underneath everything finally begins to rise closer to the surface, and your heart needs this right now. Even if you've been telling yourself to stay neutral, to stay calm, to stay detached while something unmistakably warm keeps tapping at your awareness. Listen to this carefully, because after readiness came awareness of consequence, not in a fearful way, but in a deeply human way. They began to realize that choosing honesty doesn't just change their internal world, it changes the space between you, and that realization made them slow down even more. not to hesitate, but to honor what's real. Don't scroll, because this is where intention turns into responsibility. They've been sitting with the understanding that once words are spoken, they can't be unspoken, and instead of that thought creating anxiety, it created respect for you, for themselves, and for the connection that has grown quietly. Without being forced, listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Respect is the foundation of anything lasting. They've started paying attention to the emotional weight behind their thoughts of you, noticing that it's not longing that dominates, but care, a genuine desire for your well-being regardless of outcome, and that realization surprised them. Don't scroll, because love that isn't self-centered feels different. They've reflected on moments where they could have acted sooner, spoken sooner, reached out sooner, and instead of spiraling into regret, they used those reflections as information, understanding how much they've grown since then. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Growth reframes the past without rewriting it. They've also noticed that their imagination has shifted from idealized scenarios to realistic ones, simple conversations, shared silence, mutual understanding, and that grounded imagery has made the idea of connection feel sustainable rather than overwhelming. Don't scroll, because sustainability matters. They're becoming more aware of your emotional intelligence, the way you carry yourself, the way you don't collapse into uncertainty or cling to reassurance, and that strength has made them want to show up with the same level of maturity. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Healthy connection mirrors growth. They've also felt moments of vulnerability rise unexpectedly, not emotional flooding, but soft honesty, moments when they acknowledge to themselves that you matter deeply, and instead of pushing that feeling away, they let it exist without judgment. Don't scroll, because allowing emotion without reacting to it is emotional maturity. They've started noticing how often you appear in their thoughts during moments of gratitude, when something good happens and their first instinct is to share it with you, even if only mentally, and that instinct revealed something important. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Instinct reveals truth faster than logic. They've also recognized that they're no longer trying to protect themselves from feeling too much. They're trusting themselves to handle whatever feelings arise, and that trust has replaced fear with steadiness. Don't scroll, because self-trust changes everything. They've reflected on the idea that connection doesn't require constant reassurance to be real, and that understanding has allowed them to breathe easier, knowing that what's meant to grow will do so without force. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Ease is not indifference. They've also started to sense that you might be feeling more settled lately, more grounded, less reactive, and that mutual calm has created an energetic space where honesty can land gently rather than disruptively. Don't scroll, because mutual calm is rare. They've become more intentional about their words in general, noticing how honesty without kindness can harm, and kindness without honesty can mislead, and that awareness has shaped how they want to communicate with you. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Balanced communication builds trust. They're also realizing that timing isn't just about external circumstances, it's about internal alignment, and that alignment feels close now, like standing at the edge of a conversation that's been quietly preparing itself. Don't scroll, because edges hold potential. They've noticed that their emotional reactions to your absence or presence have stabilized, that they no longer feel pulled into extremes, and that emotional regulation has made the connection feel healthier. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Emotional balance is a sign of readiness. They've also reflected on what they truly want to offer you. Not promises of forever or dramatic declarations, but consistency, respect, and the willingness to grow. alongside you, and that clarity has simplified their intentions. Don't scroll, because simplicity brings peace. They're becoming aware that whatever unfolds next will not be about convincing or persuading, but about sharing truth and allowing space for mutual response. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Mutual choice is sacred. They've also noticed that their intuition no longer pushes, it reassures, offering gentle encouragement rather than urgency, and that reassurance feels like permission to move forward when it feels right. Don't scroll, because reassurance feels different from pressure. They've begun to imagine what it would feel like to live without the weight of unspoken truth, and that imagined lightness has become motivating. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Relief is often a sign of alignment. They're also aware that vulnerability doesn't guarantee outcome, but it does guarantee integrity, and integrity has become more important to them than certainty. Don't scroll, because integrity endures even when outcomes change. They've stopped asking whether it's safe to care and started asking whether it's honest not to, and that question has shifted everything internally. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Honesty is quieter than fear but stronger. They're also sensing that this connection has reached a point where it deserves acknowledgement rather than avoidance, and that acknowledgement feels like the next natural step rather than a leap into the unknown. Don't scroll, because natural steps still move you forward. Part 5 is about emotional grounding, about love settling into something steady and intentional, about the realization that what's real doesn't demand urgency but does ask for truth, and that truth is preparing to be shared in a way that honors both hearts, gently, honestly, and with care. Stay right here with me, because Part 6 is where the quiet certainty you've both been circling begins to feel undeniable, and your heart needs this right now. Even if you've been telling yourself to stay steady, to stay neutral, to keep your feet on the ground while something unmistakably meaningful keeps rising into view. Listen to this carefully, because after emotional grounding came commitment to integrity, not commitment to outcome, but to truth, and that distinction has changed everything for them internally. Don't scroll, because this is where inner alignment turns into deliberate choice. They've been noticing how their thoughts are no longer scattered or conflicted, how there's a through line now, a steady awareness that points toward honesty without urgency, courage without drama, and presence without pressure, and that awareness feels calm rather than consuming. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Calm conviction is powerful. They've started paying attention to how their body responds when they imagine speaking openly with you, noticing there's no tightness, no panic, no need to rehearse every word, just a grounded sense that whatever needs to be said can be said simply and respectfully. Don't scroll, because simplicity is clarity. They're also reflecting on the difference between attraction that excites and connection that stabilizes, realizing that what they feel with you belongs firmly in the second category, and that realization has made them value this bond even more. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Stability doesn't dull feeling, it deepens it. They've been thinking about how they want to show up in their life moving forward, not just with you but in general, more honest, more present, more aligned with their values, and they've recognized that this connection has quietly guided them toward that version of themselves. Don't scroll, because guidance often arrives through people. They're also aware that speaking their truth doesn't mean asking you to change your pace, your boundaries, or your life. It means offering clarity and allowing space for whatever response is right for you, and that respect has become central to their intention. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Respect creates safety. They've noticed that they're no longer tempted to test the connection, to provoke reactions, or to seek reassurance indirectly, because their confidence now comes from self-trust rather than external validation. Don't scroll, because self-trust is freeing. They've also reflected on the moments when they held back in the past, understanding that those pauses were necessary for growth, not mistakes to regret, and that compassion toward their own process has softened any remaining self-judgment. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Self-compassion opens the door to honesty. They're becoming more attuned to your energy as well. Sensing when you're grounded, when you're reflective, when you're simply living your life without expectation, and that autonomy has made them feel more comfortable stepping forward without fear of disrupting your balance. Don't scroll, because balance invites equal footing. They've also noticed that the idea of making a move no longer feels like a dramatic turning point, but like a natural extension of everything that's already been happening internally, and that reframing has removed pressure. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Natural steps don't require force. They've started recognizing that love doesn't need to be loud to be real. It needs to be consistent, honest, and considerate, and those qualities have become their focus. Don't scroll, because focus directs energy. They're also aware that whatever unfolds next will be influenced by how they communicate, not just what they communicate, and that awareness has encouraged them to approach gently, with curiosity rather than assumption. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Curiosity keeps connection open. They've reflected on how often fear in the past led them to delay or avoid, and how different it feels now to act from clarity rather than hesitation. Don't scroll, because clarity dissolves fear. They've also begun to accept that vulnerability doesn't require overexposure. It requires honesty paired with boundaries, and that understanding has made the idea of opening up feel safe rather than risky. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Safe vulnerability builds trust. They're noticing that their emotional world feels more integrated now, that feelings, thoughts, and values are aligned rather than competing, and that integration has created confidence. Don't scroll, because integration brings peace. They've also recognized that this connection doesn't distract them from their purpose. It complements it, and that compatibility has reassured them that what they feel isn't a detour but an addition. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Healthy connection expands life. They've been paying attention to subtle encouragements around them, not dramatic signs, but small affirmations, conversations about courage, reminders about honesty, moments that highlight the value of speaking up with kindness. And those moments feel timely. Don't scroll, because timing often whispers. They've also become comfortable with the idea that whatever happens next doesn't need to define everything immediately, that clarity can unfold through dialogue rather than declaration, and that comfort has reduced any remaining tension. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Dialogue invites mutual understanding. They're also aware that your response, whatever it may be, deserves to be met with respect and acceptance, not persuasion or pressure, and that awareness has grounded their intention further. Don't scroll, because acceptance honors autonomy. They've stopped viewing the unknown as something to fear and started seeing it as space for authenticity, and that shift has made the next step feel lighter. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Authenticity lightens the load. They've reflected on how this connection has unfolded slowly, organically, without forcing moments or rushing milestones, and that natural pace has reinforced their trust in it. Don't scroll, because trust grows through consistency. They're also noticing that their desire to speak honestly isn't driven by impatience, but by readiness, a sense that the internal work has reached a point where expression feels appropriate. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Readiness feels steady. They've accepted that love doesn't eliminate uncertainty, but it does offer clarity about how one wants to show up, and that clarity has become their anchor. Don't scroll, because anchors keep you grounded. They're beginning to feel that the internal chapter of reflection and preparation is nearing its natural close, not abruptly, but gently, like a story ready to turn the page. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Pages turn when the moment is right. Part 6 is about commitment to truth without attachment to outcome, about confidence built on self-awareness rather than fantasy, about the calm courage that arises when someone knows they can speak honestly and stand by their integrity no matter what follows, and that courage is quietly, steadily preparing the way forward. Stay right here with me, because Part 7 is where everything that has been quietly aligning finally reaches a moment of undeniable truth, and your heart needs this right now, even if you've been trying to stay composed, trying not to hope too much, trying to live in the present while a deeper knowing keeps whispering that something meaningful is about to surface. Listen to this carefully, because what's unfolding now isn't sudden, it's earned. It's the result of patience, awareness, and a willingness to grow rather than rush. Don't scroll, because this is the point where internal certainty meets external expression. They've reached a place where holding everything inside feels heavier than the vulnerability of letting it be seen, not because they're desperate, not because they're afraid of losing you, but because honesty has become non-negotiable for them. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. They've realized that silence served its purpose, reflection did its work, and now clarity has taken root deeply enough to stand on its own. They're no longer questioning what they feel or why they feel it. They understand it, they respect it, and they're ready to honor it with action that matches intention. Don't scroll, because alignment always leads to movement. They've noticed that their inner voice is calm now, not debating, not hesitating, just steady, like a quiet confidence saying, "You know what matters, now live accordingly," and that voice has replaced every fear-based narrative they once entertained. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Calm certainty is the strongest form of courage. They're also aware that this moment isn't about dramatic gestures or overwhelming emotion. It's about presence, about showing up grounded and real, offering truth without expectation and allowing space for mutual response. Don't scroll, because mutuality is sacred. They've reflected on everything that led here. The pauses, the distance, the growth, the moments of introspection. And they see now that none of it was wasted. Each phase refined them, softened them, prepared them to communicate from a place of integrity rather than impulse. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Integrity changes how love is expressed. They're also sensing that you're ready in your own way, not waiting, not chasing, but open, grounded, living your life with self-respect. And that awareness has made them feel safe stepping forward without disrupting your balance. Don't scroll, because balance invites honesty. They've come to understand that whatever unfolds next doesn't need to define everything immediately, it just needs to be real, and that realization has lifted the pressure they once felt to get it right. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Real moments don't require perfection. They've also accepted that vulnerability doesn't guarantee outcome, but it does guarantee authenticity, and authenticity has become more important to them than certainty. Don't scroll, because authenticity builds trust even in uncertainty. They're no longer imagining what could go wrong, they're focusing on how they want to show up, with respect, clarity, and openness. And that focus has simplified everything. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Simplicity brings peace. They've recognized that love isn't something to be proven, it's something to be shared honestly and allowed to grow naturally, and that understanding has reshaped their expectations entirely. Don't scroll, because expectations can limit what's meant to unfold. They're feeling ready to speak without rehearsing, to listen without defensiveness, to meet you where you are, rather than where fear once placed them. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Meeting someone where they are is an act of respect. They've also noticed that their emotional world feels lighter now, not because feelings have faded, but because they're no longer carrying them alone. They're prepared to let truth exist outside of their own thoughts. Don't scroll, because shared truth changes the dynamic. They're aware that once honesty enters the space between you, something will shift, not necessarily dramatically, but authentically, and that shift is welcome. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Authenticity always reshapes connection. They've stopped waiting for a sign to act and started trusting the clarity they've already been given, understanding that guidance doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it settles quietly until you're ready to follow it. Don't scroll, because readiness feels steady. They're also prepared for whatever response comes, not bracing for rejection, not clinging to expectation, but grounded in the knowledge that speaking truth is an act of self-respect regardless of outcome. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Self-respect anchors vulnerability. They've reflected on how this connection has encouraged them to grow emotionally, to become more patient, more reflective, more intentional. And they recognize that growth is a gift, independent of what happens next. Don't scroll, because growth is never wasted. They're also aware that this moment doesn't erase the journey that came before it. It honors it, allowing everything you've both experienced to culminate in honesty rather than avoidance. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Honesty honors the past without being trapped by it. They've begun to feel gratitude rather than tension when they think about you. Gratitude for the connection itself, for what it revealed, for how it shaped them, and that gratitude has softened their approach even more. Don't scroll, because gratitude opens hearts. They're also sensing that whatever unfolds next will unfold naturally, without forcing timelines or outcomes, because both of you are grounded enough to allow things to develop at a pace that feels right. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Natural pacing protects what matters. They've accepted that love doesn't require certainty to move forward. It requires honesty, presence, and respect, and those are things they're ready to offer fully. Don't scroll, because readiness like this doesn't fade. They're standing at the threshold of expression, not rushing across it, but aware that remaining still would no longer reflect who they've become. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Growth eventually asks for action. They're prepared to speak from a place of calm truth, not to persuade, not to convince, but to share, allowing space for whatever response feels right for you. Don't scroll, because space honors autonomy. Part 7 is where alignment becomes lived experience, where reflection transforms into presence, where the quiet understanding that has been building finally finds its voice, and where whatever comes next is guided not by fear or fantasy, but by clarity, respect, and a deep readiness to meet love honestly, exactly as it is.